Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laurenz from Ginneken. I'm one of the project officers from the European Liberal Forum, the official think tank and political foundation of the ALDE party, and also together with Renew Europe. And I have here the honor to talk here about geoeconomics and geopolitics. Is Europe actually ready for the future? We do this together with a great panel today, including Guy Verhofstadt, former Prime Minister of Belgium, also former member of the European Parliament, and now President of the European Movement. Next to him, we have Marta Poślad, Director of Google Central Eastern Europe, and also working on the transatlantic policy. And finally, the Vice President of Łódź, Adam Pustelnik. So actually, yes, then the first question to Mr. Guy Verhofstadt. Is Europe actually ready for the future when we are talking about geopolitics? What is our place today, and are we ready for tomorrow?
Well, I can give a short answer. The answer is no. So, and then the debate maybe is over. But maybe some arguments and some reasons for such a harsh judgment. We live in a period in world history which, in my opinion, completely different than the one we have known in the 20th century and in the beginning of the 21st century. It's not longer the Cold War. It's not longer the period of the the consensus about free market economy and democracy as we have seen it after the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's what I call a new age of empires that started, in fact, after 2000 and certainly after the financial crisis of 2008. And in this new world of empires, it is mainly a competition between big continental organizations like China, India, Russia, America, who is steering the world. And this competition is a cruel, brutal one. It's not only politically, also military, as we see in Ukraine. It's also economically, it's also technologically a fight. So, and in this framework, I don't think that Europe is already ready for such a period and for such a brutal world. And we see that with what is happening in Ukraine for the moment. We are not capable, in fact, to be united enough to give more than sufficient support to Ukraine. We see it economically because our internal market is not finished. We see it technologically where Europe has no big company with a stock market value that is comparable to Americans and Asian tech companies. So we are obliged to simply copy and use their technology. So I really think that it's absolutely key and urgent that Europe gets its act together, and that means also, in my opinion, institutional changes, because the problem with Europe and the fact that we always act too little too late is that we are not a union. Everybody's talking about the European Union, but the union doesn't exist. In fact, it's still a conglomerate of individual nation states deciding by unanimity and therefore acting too little too late. So that's my brutal analysis, and I have tried to work on this 15 years in the European Parliament. I didn't succeed a lot, but I think there is still a chance to go in the right direction if we have leadership in Europe that can give direction and vision to Europe. So I think it's not only an institutional problem, it is also a leadership problem in Europe.
And of course, that leadership and that institutional problem leads into certain difficulties that we have here that give us disadvantages on economical actors, because you've named it yourself already when it comes to the big tech companies. So I'm actually going to our next speaker tonight. so indeed the director of Google Central and Eastern Europe. Like, do you actually agree with the analysis that Verhofstadt just has made? And also, like from your perspective, from your point of view, what can Europe actually do to secure its position within the world and actually maybe become a leader when it comes to certain values and certain technologies again?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's a big honor to share the stage with both of you. Again, the short answer would be no. Europe is not ready, and I think it had been up in the air for many years and couldn't have had a bigger showdown as it had a couple of weeks ago, when the Draghi report came out, and we saw that all on paper, which enlists the areas that are definitely far from being future-proof ready, but also fail to be responsive to the needs of global competition today. The good news is that there are also some recommendations and suggestions, and I think there has never been, I would say, a more consequential time for the European Union and its institutions to think about this moment as a turning point. And we're either going to start doing something differently, or we're just going to see another former prime minister report in a couple of years from now, where the extent of issues will be much broader. And this is the third conference I'm attending in the past 2 weeks, and we keep on talking about the Draghi report, lack of Europe's readiness. I know we're also now at a funny time when the new European Commission is coming together, but I think as soon as first quarter of the new year, we really need to start thinking about the action plan and not misusing that energy. And when it comes to tech, again, a very heightened debate about artificial intelligence in the past 2 years again proved that Europe is sadly nowhere to be seen at the forefront of that big shift. But I would say, Prime Minister said something like that Europe is forced to buy and to copy and use technological solutions from outside of Europe. And here's where I'm probably a little bit more optimistic, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence, which is not a product that will be sold, but it's a whole new wave of technology. It's the next big technology, and this is again where I think Europe has a lot to bring in, and I would like us to focus on 2 areas. One, it's the values, and maybe we didn't have that as many unicorns as we would have liked to see in the past decade, but Europe has definitely stood up as a group that has a lot to say about values and the philosophy of using technology. And of course, tech companies will often tell you that there has been too much regulation, but definitely a lot of good progress that has been seen comes from Europe when it comes to privacy, content, and so on and so forth. Then, secondly, it's application, the craftsmanship of Europe, European creativity. Say what you want. But Europe is still the destination where the rest of the world wants to come and spend their vacation for our appreciation of aesthetics and beauty. And we have a lot to bring in. So this is also to rethink where in this whole chain Europe will contribute. And I don't think that all is lost, but this is definitely the time to bring in those decisions. And last but not least, we're, of course, 2 weeks ahead of the US election. And I'm personally a strong believer that looking at the world map today, regardless of who wins the election and what the next administration will look like, because this will be definitely a different administration than the one we know today. I think the transatlantic axis is a fixed point of reference, given all the challenges posed by bad actors like Russia and China. So that's another big issue to crack that will define building our preparedness and readiness for all the global challenges.
Yes, thank you very much. And actually also almost same question for you, Mr. Pustelnik. Indeed, we have heard that we are on a turning point today. There are many problems, but there are also many opportunities at this moment. At this moment, what is your feeling currently? What the first next steps should be to actually secure our position in the world?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Adam. As my pre-speaker Marta said, I'm also very honored to be in such a distinguished group here. But to answer you, I wish I knew, but I don't. I have to agree with our little chit-chat before our panel started that geoeconomics is very closely associated with geopolitics. And even though I also agree with what Marta said, that Europe, in my opinion, and I've lived in the US for a couple of years, I went to high school there, it's by far the best place to live in the world, but I think it's, at some point, it may become a weakness. I will just mention you one example. Recent weeks have been quite brutal to us here in central Poland because we experienced one of the big global corporates to withdraw capital and their factories from two cities in Poland, Łódź and Wrocław. And I met the global CEO of this company. And I asked him, why? Can we do something about that? And he looked at me, a typical private equity guy, those hair combed back, with glasses and steel looks. And he said, Mr. Adam, I don't think you can do anything because our decision is not romantic. We are going with big parts of our production to China, partly to the US and partly to Turkey, because we get huge subsidies there. And Europe has an issue with the lack of consolidated leadership and still the particular interests harming the unity. And we are also prisoners of kind of a political trap. The truth is that in a global economy, when you can shift $1 billion within a second from Warsaw to Tokyo, the capital flows where the magnets are. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was, I think, voted by the Biden administration, and right now when we are discussing the theses that were included in the Draghi's report, unfortunately, and I'll say it sadly, I have to a large extent agree with Mr. Draghi. Even though Europe has great creative potential, huge talent pool, unusual quality of life, when people want to achieve business and academic excellence and top goals, for some reason they go to Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and those are those places or those centers who by far exceed anything that we do on the continent, even though we have great legacy, great history. Because this competition for capital, this competition for talent became really brutal and with a tendency to escalate. And if we will look at a very solid example, which is very close to my heart, because I've lived there for almost 2 years, and this is the state of Texas. Right now, it's the fastest growing state in the US, and cities like Austin, San Antonio, they gain like 9% annually of population, and are skyrocketing in terms of economic growth results. And guess why? Tax increment financing, the level of subsidies, the support programs for the corporate capital are so powerful, we cannot exceed that. And we cannot attract huge R&D center or a headquarters of a big company like Oracle, like Amazon, or like whatever you mentioned. Simply the solid conditions, not the values, not the narrative, but solid conditions will be drastically uncompetitive. And with the growing costs, with aging population, with the lack of high-risk capital that we can pump into the economy, and with radical disproportion when you look at our capital attempts to grow the competitiveness and grow innovation, especially in comparison with the US, even though I have 2 children. I would never want to live in the US in this point. But when you look at the solid economic accomplishments, the brutal force is there. But how to change that and how provide the answer, if I had some golden idea, I would have shared it a long time ago.
Well, thank you very much. I do think that there's no such thing as a golden bullet, of course, but maybe what, Mr. Verhofstadt, what could, for example, 2 measures be that Europe could do, or what could be which stepstones should we take to secure our place?
Well, there have been published 2 reports recently, the Letta report and the Draghi report. My proposal would be that the Letta report and the Draghi report is translated in legislative proposals within a week, and you put them on the table of the Council and the Parliament. That is what they need to do. And what they're going to do is exactly the opposite. They're going to discuss it again. They're going to make meetings about it again. They're going to again have debates on it in the Council. And within a year, there will nothing happen with these 2 reports. In fact, we know what the problem is. We know, first of all, from the Letta report, that our single market is not complete. We have a single market for champagne, chocolate, German cars, but we have no single market for the services and the goods of the future. Not for digital, not for telecom, where we have still more than 100 operators. Try once to make an app here in Europe and to launch it on the European market. You need 27 authorizations of 27 national authorities. On top of that, you need to make a deal with more than 100 mobile operators to launch it, if it is a mobile app that you want to launch, like most of the modern apps or mobile apps on our mobiles and our smartphones. So what you do is, you do like Spotify, you go first to the US, you roll out your system, there you have 1 authorization, FCC, bam. And then you make a deal with 3 mobile operators and you cover the whole of the US. Or in China, 4 mobile operators. No, here we have more than 100. So in the Letta report, they are saying we need to complete the single market. We need to stop the fact that when we have more than 100 telecom companies that make in fact life impossible for our corporates. And the second thing to do, when you asked me 2, so I have only said 1, the Letta report, is the Draghi report. Draghi report is about money, investment, how to raise capital in Europe. We have a huge possibility. We have the euro. We did it once with the Next Generation Fund, and it was subscribed, these bonds, in 1 week. It was a huge success. And now the member states are saying, no. The reaction, for example, on the Inflation Reduction Act of Biden is a good example of things that going in the wrong way. Instead of doing something similar, because the Inflation Reduction Act, what it is, it's our tax credits. Because you have a federal tax system, so you can give tax credits. We don't have that in Europe because that's all contributions of member states. That is the financing of the European Union. So we don't have not a possibility to give tax credits. What we say, the big countries can start again with states aid. That is our reaction to, in fact, destroying the single market instead of helping the single market. So there is only one thing necessary. These 2 men, 2 Italians, by the way, Draghi and Letta, have made, at the request of the previous Commission and the previous Council, 2 really very good reports that are a little bit similar, I would say, than the report of Delors at the time. You remember that more than 30 years ago, we were in difficulties, we got stagflation, and Delors said, okay, I have a recipe. The recipe is the launch of a single market. And he published a white paper, he did proposals to the Council, and what the Council at that moment did, the member states, was to put out everything what they thought that was their sovereignty. Telecom, capital services, one of the reasons that we don't have a real capital market in Europe. I mean, we are talking about the capital market already decades, but it's not there, a capital market. To raise capital for a new company, for new innovation, yeah, it's go better than 10 years ago, that's true. There is also a little bit of venture capital, but it's not comparable with what is happening in the US. Absolutely not comparable. And so that needs to be done. We need a commission that is not thinking a lot, but simply takes the two reports, put them in legislative proposals, and push them on the table of Council and Parliament. And then maybe something will happen, and we will be, again, not only a single market and a continent for the old economy, but also for the new economy that is emerging faster and faster. Normally, when I go somewhere, I have always a slide with me of the stock market value of the tech companies. And a second slide of who is producing the data in our world. We are the biggest Europeans, biggest producers of data, again with Asia. We are the big. So, but everything is, we do nothing with it. It our American companies would do something with it. So we are making the data, they are making the profit. That's mainly the division of labor in the world of today. And that has to change. And if we don't change it, okay, it will be fine to live. I like Europe. I like every country in Europe and so many cities, but it's not only a question of that it is culturally interesting to live in Europe, it has also to be economically viable in the future to live in Europe.
Yes, thank you. And you want to react on that, or?
A couple of comments. First of all, who would have thought that it will be two Italians that will inspire the most disruptive debate about economy in Europe? That's one. And on a more serious note, I'm afraid that all of us on this stage are going to agree when it comes to diagnosis. I think we're going to differ when it comes to, we may differ when it comes to solutions. So I would be thrilled to hear more about that. But I would put there one more thing on top of the economic viability and where this is heading us. And I think economic circumstances have never been aligned more closely with security than they are today. And it's, fragmentation when it comes to our postal systems across 27 member states is annoying, but something we can live with. But then when you look back to February 2022, when Russia attacked Ukraine, we also saw an incredible fragmentation in how fast decisions were taken, in how different the tone was, and how long it took us to kind of get on the same page. And by the way, there are some member states, some of them coming from this region, that are starkly different in how they would like to keep on fighting Ukraine. So this is a big problem, and this is not just the economic front. The problem of the political wheel is where it all started, but the question, and it looks like it's not going to get any better. So where does it take us from here? What are the forums? And I'm looking at you as someone who has such a rich political career and knows Europe and from the nation state perspective and EU institutions inside out. And I know I'm not the moderator here, but if I can ask a question at you. Where do we go from here? How do we? Where's the platform and where's the forum?
We are going to the next crisis, and then so people are saying, "Look, Europe. That's typical Europe. There needs to be a crisis, and then we react to the crisis, and then you make a step forward." And that is what the official philosophy, I would say, of building the European Union, from crisis to crisis. But I'm always saying, once there will be a so big crisis, it will be the last crisis for Europe. And we will disappear in one or other way. It's completely stupid to think that you need to be prepared for the world of tomorrow, not to react to the world of tomorrow. That is what it is. So we are all witnessing now a new momentum has to be created. What is that new momentum? I thought, I have to tell you, the last years, that the momentum was the war of the brutal invasion of Russia in Ukraine. What should Delors have done if that was happening in his time? He would have put on the table a proposal for a European defense union immediately. Not with what you have to know, your defense is the biggest waste of money in the European Union. Eh? You're spending nearly 300 now with the Brits. I'm always taking the Brits in when it concerns defense. We are spending with the Brits together 330 billion euro a year on defense. That's 3 times today the budget of Russia, the increased budget of Russia, because a few years ago it was 60 billion, now it's 110 billion that they spend. So we spend 3 times more than Russia on defense. I have not the impression that that is the case. We have a duplication of everything. We spend more or less 35% of the Americans on defense, but that are the world leaders. And we can only do 10% of the operations for the American army. So I'm a lawyer, I don't know nothing about mathematics, but I know one thing, if you spend 35%, you can only do 10%, you're 3 times less effective, no? And that is the case today. Why? Because duplication, we have 130 weapon systems. The Ukrainians become nuts when they arrive with, we arrive with our military equipment, but it's all different. And so it's another example of people who think, yeah, we wait for the next crisis and then we will adapt. And that is, that tomorrow the next crisis may be there in 2 weeks. The next crisis is Trump coming back saying, yeah, NATO, I'm not so sure that we will continue to pay for it. Everything is possible with this guy. Don't say, oh, no, that will never happen. He will be stopped by his generals. He will not be stopped by his generals or by the parliament. Maybe he will have a majority in Capitol Hill in the 2 houses and sitting in the White House. So the next crisis is maybe before us. Are we ready for this next crisis? No, we are not ready. The defense union is not in place since the war in Ukraine started in 22, 2 years ago. Our leaders think that producing ammunition together, that's the European defense union. Completely stupid. Producing common munition together, that's the end of the process. That's not the beginning of the process. You make a defense union, then you will have common equipment, and then you will have a common industry, and not the opposite. So, sorry that I'm a little bit nervous now when it make me... Okay, it should be better that they become like me in the council. That will be better.
Anger looks good on you.
Anger, yeah, anger. They have to become anger in their normal business, in council and commission. And so, will it happen? Maybe, when there is a huge crisis that shows to everybody, the whole public, the prime ministers, the president, the only way forward is to further integrate this bloody continent. It has only one future, and that is together.
Maybe one question towards you, Adam, because you're, of course, also like a newer generation of politicians. Will this be the generation that will actually make this happen without a crisis? Are we aware with our generation currently as well on what is facing us worldwide? And is there a possibility to start building this more united Europe, to defend our place in the world, to defend our way of living, our values, and to defend our wealth?
Comparing to Mr. Verhofstadt, my political career is poor, not rich. Basically, I'm just starting. But referring to your question, I'm not so sure if we should, with such determination, that we should defend our way of life. As I said, in my opinion, the quality of life, the comfort, and the thoughts of Fukuyama that, in my opinion, in many European heads have still not died, I think might be kind of a risk. And what I meant by trap of democracy, from what I see, as I said, I'm also a humble lawyer. I'm not an expert on global finance and many things. But in my opinion, we are entering an age or a period of permanent crisis or crisis. And what was our huge argument and a huge benefit, and I think we all agreed that Europe is still the best continent to live. I think that this illusionary and fragile comfort may be something that blurs the true perspective. And the trap of democracy is that in order to move forward or to remove some obstacles, you sometimes have to do some things that are unpopular or things that require pretty strong leadership. And in Europe, this deliberative democracy, this constant discussion, which for many, many years in different age was a huge advantage, that the decisions were not made like a bullet, like we were used to in recent 8 years in Poland. Just a political leader, he had a thought in the evening by his tea, and next day you have a legal act. I'm not saying that this is the good direction, and I still see some values in this deliberative democracy. But as I said, without consolidated leadership in this particular period, and without the ability to sometimes, please forgive me this banal expression, getting out of your comfort zone, I don't see a chance that we could effectively compete with powers that want to compete with us. And I'll just end my sentence with a quote, and this quote might be surprising in this context. Stiglitz once said that this invisible hand of the market is invisible because it doesn't exist. And in my opinion, it's true. Because when you see the most powerful capital and economic players in the world, and I just noticed it from some perspective. I regret it, but I'm not a regular guest in Joe Biden's cabinet or in Xi Jinping's, room. But the public policy in those elements is very strong. And the states, they are present almost at every stage. And when you look especially in the US, which is the synonym of free market, their public policy and their state's intervention to grow or retain competitiveness and grow and retain the #1 place in economic race in the world is huge. And I don't see that here. And that's why I need to once again, unfortunately, I agree with Mr. Verhofstadt that if we will not do something with the theses that were included in those 2 reports, in my opinion, my natural optimism will be definitely lower in the years to come.
Thank you. And actually, then the question also for you, Marta. The consolidated leadership, will that actually really help the EU forward as well? Like looking from private sector, also when it comes to the tech giant as Google itself, would that also be easier of doing business in Europe? But on the other side, is it maybe sometimes more interesting that no new giant tech companies would arise from Europe, because of course that could cause extra competition? Like I know it's like a bit like 2 sides of the same coin, but I don't know how you would look at it from that perspective.
Sure. Just Marta, before you start, because you asked a super question, and I'll just say one thing, maybe to correct what I previously said. Our public policy is also there, and we have this omnipotent tendency to regulate everything, but not necessarily always when it's needed. I'll just give one example which is relevant to what Marta does professionally. This is artificial intelligence. Even though no artificial intelligence is being created in Europe, it's created by Europeans, but in Silicon Valley, but we already started to regulate that. Even though we don't really have that much to regulate on our continent, but we already regulate that. But when it comes to strong decisions to break the status quo, this is this element in which we are weaker.
That's a great question. So first of all, let's go back to the point of the lack of the single market. There's no digital single market, although you would think that this is where it should be easiest to achieve digital single market because it doesn't require a lot of physicality and all that, as opposed to my favorite example, which is postal system, which makes it super difficult for European e-commerce to grow into a global superpower, right? So to your question, definitely consolidated leadership is great for companies. I can speak for a foreign investor where already today, and that is something that the EU has dealt with, European Union tries to provide laws and regulations that should serve as a one-stop shop. Does that work in practice? Not necessarily, because then you see so much gold plating in implementations of the directives that it's still hard to operate, even for a foreign investor, on the same basis across the EU. And frankly, I think lack of that consolidated leadership is one of the reasons why Europe is not competing. Why you do not have European companies competing with Google and other large tech companies. And frankly, 2-3 years ago, this could have been a more difficult question for our sector, but the circumstances have changed. There's so much space in the AI, in the AI breakthrough and other emerging technologies, breakthrough like quantum, for new players to come in. And indeed, look at the wave of European companies leaving Europe, going to the US, exactly to go the Spotify route. So they come back and they identify themselves as, again as European. But there is a big reshuffle on the global technology market, including some of us that were hailed as the ones that are here to stay. We've been constantly challenged in the past 2 years by the newcomers, but these newcomers, unfortunately, except for some exceptions that confirmed the rule, like amazing Mistral from France, are not coming from here. Competition is generally good for the tech industry for one good reason, because it stretches the boundaries of what is possible, and emergence of companies like OpenAI is a great example of how it mobilized more mature tech companies like Google, Apple, and Amazon to innovate further. And indeed, it would be great to see more European companies in that race. But frankly, it's hard to spot that, especially where we sit. Poland is known for its amazing advanced technological talent, and it would be very hard to point to a company, startup, or an AI-driven project that is being constructed here. But then you can have a long list of names of very talented Poles who support other technological projects, including coming from large tech platforms, but generally globally from startups, and sadly they're not emerging here. But that takes me to the point on the public policy front, because I asked PM Verhofstadt a question: where do we go from here? Like, where's the platform this could be debated? And my thinking here, obviously heavily biased by where I come from and where I'm based, is that the I would say more mobilized approach and ambition coming from leaders from Central and Eastern Europe and recently Poland in specific is an opportunity to maybe turn the table around. And that also refers to the crisis concern. It's hard for me to imagine what other crisis we could face other than war in Ukraine, a kinetic war that is happening beside the border of this country that would mobilize us to start thinking differently. And I think this is something you specifically feel in the Baltics. This is something you feel in Poland, in Czech Republic, in Romania, that, sir, it's hard for us to imagine a worse crisis that could have awakened Europe, because it feels just very, it just feels so close and so dramatic. So I think there is a lot of hope coming out of this region, and looking at the generation of leaders. Hopefully, this will bring some kind of a change in the foreseeable future.
So actually maybe like one of the last questions also towards Verhofstadt right now. Then what will it take to take the necessary steps? How can we actually shake awake the current political leaders here in Europe to do what's necessary, to take those steps from the reports, to learn the lessons from the war in Ukraine, from all the crises that we have seen? What do we need to do to wake them up?
I already responded to that, talking about the crisis and the next crisis, but it will take also a new generation of politicians, let's be honest. I got an enormous hope after the last elections. It was a new German government. The new German government published a very, very positive government agreement, very pro-European. But afterwards, I didn't see anything. The president of France, Macron, gave a fantastic Sorbonne speech. Okay, and what happened with it? We can say that in this country there is a pro-European leadership. No, with us very clearly. There is in Spain. There is not even a discussion about it. All political parties are there for pro. So you have the critical mass in Europe of leaders to do, but apparently it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. You're all busy with their, I would say not national but local business, while the challenges we face are continental, intercontinental, definitely, economically, technologically, and military. So it will come from a new generation, that's all. So a new generation will be needed who believe in the fact that the only way to solve our problems is on the European level. And the only way to have a weight on the world level is to do it through Europe.
And do you believe that, as actually being also part of the new generation of politicians, would you would you also fight for this? Would you work on this actually to fulfill the work that needs to be fulfilled now, to reform, restructure Europe? To again, because I've said this phrase many times already in the past 50 minutes. But to work on our place in the world and to make a strong Europe. Will you actually what? Or how should I maybe rephrase the question? What do you think that you can do the coming years to achieve these goals, to help achieve these goals, to help wake the rest of your political colleagues, to wake them up?
I'm just a provincial local politician, so it would be stepping out of my line to try to instruct people who have the most powerful political tools in their hand. Nevertheless, if I would have to answer your question, I don't see that we have any alternative. And once again, our panel will lack emotional spice because unfortunately I have to agree with my great pre-speaker. And there are some limit of crisis that you can go through. There might be at some point a crisis that will be really difficult to go back to business. And I even think that many people, many decision makers, they are awake, but they are hostages of their internal politics. And I don't see that many people who found a clear idea or a clear way to step out of this vicious circle. Because it's not so easy. Because in democracy, you're elected here. You have to be present globally. You have to act globally. You have to take stand. You have to sometimes make difficult decisions. But you still have to be elected. So, and you are elected in a time where populism grows. Look at the entire EU. The debate is as polarized as it never has been. The role of internet in politics and this way of communication has skyrocketed. In my personal opinion, not always necessarily for good, because of the heat of the debate and its constant dynamics. It looks like you've been in a permanent electoral process. In my opinion, especially in Europe, if we want to maintain or retain at least some fundamentals of our legendary way of life, this is something that should, and in my opinion, will be because I don't see any alternative, the priority in the years to come. Definitely, when I speak to my colleagues all over Europe, they know that. They visit Silicon Valley. They see how the capital flows. They see how many issues are still with China, even though the nearshoring, friendshoring debate, many people said that after breaking the supply chains in the pandemics, basically China is over. No, it's not happening. A lot of manufacturing still goes there right now, even in a faster pace. And in my opinion, we have to face certain old truths who are not truths anymore. Like with the Stiglitz thing, if we will not maintain a public policy that will address the public aid and also competing effectively for the capital with all the tools that we have and with all the power, you know, in a global economy where everyone competes against each other, or maybe not always against, but with each other, if someone will tell me that I'm wrong, I would love to have a different set of opinions. But no one proved me that I'm wrong in this point. And many, many far wiser people than I am, they are already politically mature enough or brave enough to express that. And the best example is the Draghi report, which in my opinion very correctly underlines, highlights and mentions things that many people were speaking about in cabinets, on corridors, but many people were afraid to express it openly. In my opinion, this is the way to go. Maybe not literally in this particular way, but at least in this direction.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if there's still a reaction to it, because I see we have 9 minutes left, so maybe we could take a question or two maybe from the audience. Maybe that could be nice as well. So I'm just having a look. Is there anyone with a question in the audience for our panel today? I see here a sir in the front. Maybe you can maybe come up to the front, or I don't know if there is a microphone going along. Yeah, I'll just give you mine.
Marcin Święcicki, the question to Guy Verhofstadt. As a matter of fact, two questions. One, your position on migration crisis in Europe, what we can do, what liberals can do to somehow to stop it or to solve the problem, to manage the problem. And the second question is about European Defence Force. Do we need a 28th army subordinated to European authorities, or we need to strengthening cooperation between existing armies?
On the army, my question is very simple. Yeah, you need a European Defence Union that means a European army. The US have also a European army. That doesn't mean that there are not national forces in every state. Every state in the United States of America has an army. But on top of that, and with coordination, there is a federal army. And in fact, we need exactly to do the same. That was the initial proposal, by the way, of the founding fathers of the European Union. Nobody knows that anymore. But in '54, on the table, there was a proposal for a constitution, at the same time a European Defence Union, based on 42 divisions, with in total 2,000 airplanes, more than 12,000, even more tanks, and so on and so on. So it was completely a European, with 6 countries at that time, with 6. And it is because then a negative vote in the French National Assembly that torpedoed this whole project. So what we need to do is not to, naturally these proposals need to be adapted. There were no drones at that time, there was not enough missiles at that time. So, but the initial idea of the founding fathers was to do, first of all, that. And I'm saying if we had today this European Defence Union established in 1945, maybe there was no war in Ukraine. There was another balance of power in the world, and another balance of power. And that doesn't mean anything against NATO, because this European Defence Union was meant as the European pillar of NATO, approved in 1948 by the American Senate. First there was NATO. Then they said, okay, NATO will be established with an American pillar and a European pillar. So you need to establish your European Defense Union. That was the request of the Americans, approved by the American Senate. And then came naturally the French, negative vote, Stalin was that, and they got themselves the atomic bomb, so it was not necessary anymore. A big mistake, huh? By Pierre Mendès France at that time. Okay, that's history. We cannot return in history, but we can return to the initial ideas that were launched at that moment. So that's the first thing. We need to do that as fast as possible. My main criticism to the actual president of the Commission, Ms. von der Leyen, is she is an old Minister of Defense of Germany. At least she has the capability, I think, and the knowledge to come forward with a project in that sense. That is absolutely key, urgent, certainly if there is a change in 2 weeks in the White House with all the problems that will create. And then on migration. On migration, what we need is a real European migration policy. There is no Europe. We have discussed, debated 15 years, 15 years before we got an agreement between in the council on migration. And the first thing what is happening now is that everybody's doing his own thing. We need to secure our borders. Europe needs to do that to secure our borders. Because the outside border of Greece or Spain or Italy, that's the Polish border, that's the Belgian border. That's the border of everybody. And at the same time, we need to make legal migration possible. There is an abuse that's very clear of asylum and refugee status because there are no legal migration routes. At least not one existing legal migration routes instead of the 27 different systems that exist today in Europe. And thirdly, Europe not only needs to do that, but needs also to give the possibility for real asylum seekers to ask for asylum outside the European Union, in our consulates, in our embassies. What we do today is, you can still have asylum, but first of all, you need to arrive in Europe. If you need to arrive in Europe, you can be killed on the route through the Balkan, you can be killed on the Mediterranean. That is what is happening. So we need to change that, and to change that is not so difficult. That is to, in fact, use our consulates, our embassies, and so on as the prime, I would say, place where asylum seekers and refugees can ask for asylum instead of what they are doing now, jumping in a boat, coming to Italy, and then receiving there in Italy a little bit of money and be spread in Europe. Because that is what is happening today, but already in the past, after the Kosovo crisis, and so on. But that means that member states needs to be ready to say, okay, from now on, asylum, refugee, and migration policy will be a common, a full 100% common, implemented, mandatory policy of the Union. And it will be harsher than today. It will be certainly criticized by some people, such an approach, but it will be an effective approach. And not what we see today when there is a problem, or in Poland, or in Germany, or in Italy, or whatever, poof, the whole system blows up, huh? And everybody does what he thinks he has to do. And there is no European policy. Somebody who is now talking about the European migration policy, yeah, it's a joke, because it doesn't exist.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there are any comments left from other panelists on this topic, or anything left on your mind? Then maybe I could just maybe start to summarize, because we're starting to run out of time. From what I remember from what we talked about today, was that we are indeed on a turning point. There are many problems, challenges, but we know what we have to do for many years already. What it actually takes, and let this be maybe also a call for action for the people now forming the new Commission, for the people now for a new mandate of the European Parliament, but also all the national parliaments, to make the necessary moves, not just to protect Europe, but to protect our lives, and to protect our way of living, and maybe also reform our way of living, so we are future-proof, so we can become a truly strong Europe of the 21st century. I would like to thank my panelists of the day, Guy Verhofstadt, Marta Poślad, and Adam Pustelnik. Please give them a warm applause for this great panel. Thank you very much, everyone.
Jedzą kanapki z kawiorem.
Nadzwyczajna kasa.
Obrażanie dziennikarzy telewizji polskiej.
Chodzi o działania polityczne.
Ratowanie ofiar dla pedofilów.
Für Deutschland.
TVP Info. Włącz się na nowo.
Radość, nadzieja, życie, wyzwanie, pasja, pamięć, zaufanie, pokój, jedność. Słowa tworzą świat. Polskie Radio. Źródło wiarygodnych informacji.
Plany biznesowe powstają z marzeń. Dlatego nie ma dwóch takich samych firm. Jedni chcą działać na całym świecie. Innym cały świat mieści się w dłoni. Sukces biznesu to nie tylko jego wielkość, ale też szczęście, jakie przynosi ludziom. PKO Bank Polski.
Uwielbiam szycie w sieci. Wczoraj podszyłem się pod wnuczka, wieczorem uszyłem intrygę na apce randkowej, a dziś planuję grubymi nićmi szyte oszustwo z promocją. Tak się szyje.
Na oszustów są sposoby. Zapoznaj się z poradami ekspertów na niedajsiepodszyć.pl.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihrer Ausreise.
Polskie Radio.
Jedynka.
Rodzina spółek Pelion to 12 tysięcy osób pracujących w ponad 300 spółkach w Polsce, Szwecji, Wielkiej Brytanii i na Litwie. Jesteśmy liderem w branży ochrony zdrowia. Od 1990 roku dbamy o długość i jakość życia. Pracować z nami możesz w jednym z 7 obszarów.
Dziś Nowy Jork, jutro Londyn. Za chwilę Paryż, Warszawa, Berlin. Na całym świecie kultura pulsuje rytmem. Wystarczy tylko włączyć 2. 2. Polskie Radio. Jesteś na miejscu.